In this video, we're going to look at creating the enemy AI. And we're going to use the MP grid functions that are within GameMaker. Just going over this here, it uses a complex form of pathfinding called A star. And you can look that algorithm up. It's quite complicated for your grade. And so we're not going to cover how that works. GameMaker implements the algorithm using these other functions down here that we can use. And we're only going to use two. We're going to use MP grid create, and we're going to use MP grid add instances, and probably also MP grid path. Well, we'll have to use those three, MP grid path. So the idea is as follows, and I'm pretty much kind of summarizing from this here. We create this grid, you know what a grid is, that covers the room. And we are going to make our grid 16 by 16, or maybe 32 by 32. I think the walls are 32 by 32, so we might just make it a grid that size. 16 by 16 would be fine. We'll have a look in a sec. Then we're going to add the walls to this grid and say these areas are off limits, okay? And then we're going to, for the enemies, define a start position for them. That'll just be their XY. And the goal position, where they have to get to. And as long as the room has been designed so that there is connectivity between all areas, the A-star algorithm will find a path, an efficient path. It's always going to find the shortest path from one point to another point in the room. Now, this does need to be, connected. That's what I'm saying. So for example, if this enemy here had the code on it and it was told to get to here, well, it can. And the shortest way is probably, well, is up there to there. A longer way might be to go all around here and back to here, but the shortest path is from there to there. If I put that wall there, the shortest path is then going to be from there to there. But if I close that in, then it's either not going to do anything, or it could cause an error because it can't get to that location. So we'll just get rid of those and put that back there. So you do need to make sure that your room is connected. Of course, there are algorithms to do that, but we're keeping it simple. We're just going to do a visual check, and it looks like there's no parts in my room that are unconnected. All right, so going back to here, I'm going to create a new object. This one doesn't need a sprite. It's going to be called object grid AI. And in the start event for this, I'm going to add a create event. And what I'm going to do is go to here, bring that code across, and I'm going to say set up for grid AI. And that's all good. And then what I'm going to do is put in a function called randomize. It takes no arguments, but it's still a function, so it needs these brackets at the end of it. And what this does is it generates a random seed based on the time or some CPU clock cycles or something like that. You're probably familiar with seeds from maybe Minecraft. You type in a random seed, it generates a whole world. In a computer, numbers are never truly random. And if I was to run this and try and get some random stuff happening, it would start off the same every time. Essentially what we're going to do is the computer is going to pick random locations in the room for the enemy AI to move to. However, if we don't randomize it, it will always follow the same pattern. So it'll first go to maybe this point here, and then it will go to this point here, and then it will go to this point here every single time. It gets a bit predictable. Put randomize, it'll change that. I'm going to declare a variable here, and this is going to be global. That means it can be accessed from every single object, and that's important for this. It just makes it a bit easier for us to access the grid from the enemy object. The cell width is going to be equal to 16. So I did say 32 before. I think we'll go with 16. It'll make it a bit more accurate. And the grid here, what I've done is define the variable grid, but now I'm going to assign it. I'm going to create the grid. MP grid create. And this is a function. And down the bottom here, it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different arguments. If you want to see how this works, I think I can bring up the help menu. So MP grid create. So it takes 6 different arguments. The first one is the starting X coordinates of the grid, the starting Y coordinates of the grid, the number of horizontal cells that the grid will contain, vertical cells, and then the cell width of each individual cell in the grid. Gives you an example down the bottom here of what to do it, and essentially this is what I'm going to do, except I'm going to make a few changes to it. So it is going to start at 0, 0. It's going to be room underscore width divided by cell width. That way I can change the cell width later. If I want it to go 32 by 32, it'll be faster to calculate, but it's not going to make any big difference in this case. Room height divided by cell width. And then the last two, each cell is going to be the cell width wide, or 16 wide, and the cell width. I might change this to cell size. That would make more sense because I'm using it for height as well. And so using the word width for height doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's better. Cell size equals 16. All right, and then MP add instances. This is another function. Oops, MP grid add instances. This is another function. It takes 1, 2, 3 arguments down the bottom. The first one is the ID of the grid that I want to add these instances to. These are going to be the objects that block the path. So I want to add it to the grid, which is that ID. The object I want to add is object wall, and I don't want it to be precise. Okay, so that is pretty much it. Now what I can do, just to test that this is working, I can add a draw event. Let's go draw event, and I'll go to here, add some code, test the grid, draw, oops, it's actually MP underscore grid draw grid. Okay, so it takes one argument and it needs the name of the grid to draw. Okay, so looking at this, I'm going to go into here. I'm just going to go and add an object grid AI. I'm just going to delete that there and add that. So it doesn't matter where I add it, just as long as it's in the room somewhere. It's going to be invisible, or I might put it down here. Okay, and I click play, and it's going to draw the grid for me. Now I just realized that the fog's still going to be there, so that might, oh, what have I done? Wrong number of arguments for grid create. Okay, so now I've got some errors here, and it's telling me where the errors are in object grid AI, in event create. So it's on line 6, basically. It's saying there's a whole bunch of errors there on line 6. So let's have a look at that. Object grid AI, draw. I think I know what the problem is. You might not have got that problem actually. Let's see. Create. Line 6. Oh, it is giving me an error. Why? 0, 0. Oh, there, I didn't put a comma. Yeah, that's all good now. Okay. So let's test that out. Okay, now the green is the actual traversable areas, but because this line of sight stuff's on, I'm just going to do 2 things to show you how this works. I'm going to make this invisible, and I'm also going to make the wall invisible. And I'll switch them straight back on afterwards. We just want to test to see that our grid is working. Red areas should be unpassable. Yeah, so there we go. Green areas are passable, red areas will be unpassable for our AI. So we're going to actually create another enemy that's not the same as this one. That's my health bar up there, so that's why that guy's moving through it. So that's all working fine. The grid has been calculated. It's saying, hey, these walls, nothing can go through there. All good. So I'll turn that back on, make those visible, and make those visible. All done. So I'll get this object grid AI and delete the draw event. We don't need that in there. Yes. Okay, next video we're going to look at creating the enemy and setting up the pathfinding. That's going to be quite a long video. It's probably be about 17 to 20 minutes long.